how AI can be applied in the healthcare domain. Are we at a moment that we can apply AI algorithms into medical diagnosis, and how NLP, natural language processing, can be applied to patient diagnosis? Following is my conversation with Yinnon Dolev, an expert in application of AI to healthcare, an NLP lead at Philips, and a PhD in neuroethology. Enjoy. Yinnon, could you give us a short description of the application of AI in healthcare as it comes both to information generation and medical information extraction?
Gladly. So first of all, healthcare is a very, very broad field, from research to clinical applications and also to post-market analysis. In each of these, the main confounding factor is the sheer volume of data. But another very important factor is the fact that when we're talking about healthcare, the issue of personal information gets ramped up a notch. So to get access to a client's scan or a client's medical history, you need, according to various regulations, either the permission of that specific person, that specific patient or client, or the hospital or care center that was taking care of him, who owned the data, and the entire conversation of the ownership of the data and what you can and cannot use it for is a continually discussed question. And regulations in Europe and the US are probably the most known for pushing this, but every nation in the world has some regulations regarding this. This is where the challenge of AI in generation comes very important in the healthcare world. So, for example, if I wanted to create a machine learning algorithm that would look into the family history of a patient in order to consider his or her risk score for a potential cancer, then we're not talking only about that one patient and his family, or not only about getting the consent of him and his entire family, but we're going to need hundreds or thousands of such cases. And to get the permission of all those people is going to be all but impossible. Even if you anonymize the data and make sure that you can't trace it back to the actual person, the concept of healthcare is such that it is practically impossible to completely anonymize the information, because each one of the patient's history points and medical history points is an identifier. So we're talking about a patient, we say that, his father had colon cancer and his mother suffered from dementia. There aren't many people who have that. And you add additional points of information, then it becomes possible, even without additional personal information, obvious personal information, to identify that person. So this is actually a very challenging problem. To overcome this, more and more healthcare providers and healthcare technology companies are starting to generate false information. So we have 4 or 5 patients, and from that, we create a randomized creator to generate more and more false information, and then run the actual prediction machine learning on that false information. Of course, you have the diminishing returns, or rather the compounding errors. Once you generate the false information, you need to prove that that false information is representative of what is really happening in the world. And that's a completely other challenge. So that's one aspect of generation. That happens not only with family history. Obviously, it happens with scans and images, with x-rays, to create, various scrambled images that only have the ailment that you're searching for in that image, and then you generate from that many different images to apply your machine learning on. It can also come in the form of genetics. So, if a company uses genes in order to investigate potential risk scores, or pharmaceutical companies in order to investigate potential drugs, then they can generate false genes or false mutations in order to then compound or enable the machine learning of the extraction of information. Another very large area of machine learning in healthcare, and that is one that is right now, I think, where the main arms race is, and that's natural language processing. All of the major players, and even the not so obvious major players in healthcare, are rushing towards better natural language processing in healthcare. And the reasons are, or should be, pretty obvious. The majority, and I mean between 80 to 95% of our medical information is stored in a non-structured format. That is in doctor notes, in references, in the radiologist conclusions of a scan, the radiologist reports or the cardiology reports, or various other free text-based information. And this is also true about the metadata of the scans. A great example is an ultrasound. So when a person receives an ultrasound, a lot of times the conclusion or the person's age and sex, etc., is on the image itself. And all of this information is very, very important in order to create the correct clusters for clinical decision support, i.e. supporting the doctor in understanding what is the patient's underlying problems, or in deciding how to treat that person. But it's also incredibly important for clinical research. In order to create a cohort of similar people, in order to test a new treatment, or to understand what is the actual ailment. Just recently, such studies have been done to understand how to identify COVID-19 in the lung scans, in CT of the lung. And that was done incredibly fast by creating these cohorts with the patients. Thankfully, because of the drastic nature of this disease, the World Health Organization openly provided to all the major healthcare providers the data source of these images. And a lot of companies in record time came up with solutions for quickly identifying and scanning patients using a CT scan. So all of these come into the the extraction of information from a patient. And natural language processing, for example, there was a company called Zebra. A number of other companies have done this as well. Zebra has recently been bought by another healthcare provider. Their solution was to identify on X-rays certain illnesses. And in order to train the machine learning, they needed a very large cohort of these X-rays. And to have the hospitals or the radiologists or the clinicians in the hospitals go through hundreds and thousands of images to select those that have and do not have that sign is a very costly task, both in time and money. However, to collect the radiologist reports associated to that scans of hundreds and thousands of cases, and then run an NLP algorithm on the report to identify in the report whether or not this X-ray has that information, is a very simple task. So here it's natural language processing for cohort creation for machine learning, and not directly for extraction of the patient's information in the clinical workflow. So that's the other side of how AI is becoming, or rather machine learning is becoming very, very strong in the healthcare environment.
This is quite mind-blowing, because NLP is mostly associated with ChatGPT, but with prompting and more play than serious things. And before
I agree. And the recent news about ChatGPT getting what, in my opinion, is the correct pushback from governing bodies falls directly into place. That's a result of a technology that is not yet ready for market. Mind you, they never claimed to be ready for market. ChatGPT was released into the world as a, see what we can do, play around with it, and let's see where we can get. And that's completely fair. And the fact that some companies are pushing back on it, such as the recent ruling in Italy, is a
This
very
week.
strong, in Sweden as well, you said?
No. This week.
This week, yeah. So I think that's a very strong positive, because without keeping the creators of these programs in check, it's a potentially dangerous world. And the world of regulations on machine learning is usually a few years behind on the capabilities of the latest technology. In healthcare, this actually is a common frustration with the companies. So regulation in healthcare, for obvious reason, is government regulated and incredibly powerful. When I mean powerful, the power over the regulation bodies on any company creating or providing any healthcare solution is all-encompassing. Without an FDA approval, you cannot sell this product, and you cannot go and release your company on the NASDAQ, because nobody will buy it. And the same with the European regulations. The reason for this is obvious. The potential cost is human life, and it's very, very direct. So the technologies being embedded in the clinical workflow in healthcare, and when I say clinical workflow, I mean actually directly relating to the health of the patient, is older technology. We're 5-6 years in the past in terms of when the technology released and when you'll actually see it in healthcare. In the research, it's the latest and greatest. So hospitals have, always their sights forward of saying, or rather, individual doctors in hospitals who have all this data and have the actual understanding of the problems in the field are going to look for the latest technologies, and they're going to play around with them. And once they have a patent or an idea, they'll turn to one of the major players in creating clinical solutions and say, hey, I want to work with you on developing this idea into an actual product, or create their own startup. From there, from the point where they use the latest technology to the point where they can release this as a product, it's between 5 to 10 years minimum. That means that when they release this product, it's already a 5 to 10-year-old technology. And in my opinion, that's not a bad thing. It's dangerous to rush forward with technology too quickly until it is proven and regulated.
What's your attitude towards the letter of Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and at consultants?
Let's ignore the actual content and look at the actual feelings behind them. Technology is going to move forward, and that is very obvious. What they're saying is, hey, let's move forward more slowly. Of course, they're saying, let's stop it, but nobody in their right mind is believe that is actually going to happen. But that pushback, on a global scale, that conversation of how to move forward, in my opinion, is incredibly important. I'm not in their opinion of saying that this is completely dangerous and we're going to have Skynet take over the world. I don't believe in that processes. And also, I think we're a lot further away than people feel with the singularity, with the actual consciousness. We're not in AI. We're still in machine learning. And ChatGPT proves that beyond a doubt. Everybody looked at this as, hey, I'm actually having a conversation with the person in the beginning. And very quickly they realized, actually, all he knows is what Google knows. And he's better at filtering that information, but he's not generating anything. He's copy pasting. He's understanding from all the crap that's in the internet. And that's what they're doing. So that's machine learning. That's not AI. And their fear is that AI and self-generating AI is going to take over the world. I think we're pretty far away from that still, mainly because we don't even understand that process in ourselves. And I think there's
Hopefully, we never will, in
profoundly,
my opinion.
well, maybe. I think that at some point we're going to understand the backbone of cognition. And much like anything else in biology or anything else in physics, it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be a result of multiple compound interacting network systems. It's going to be an incredibly complicated system. To emulate that with machines, we might get there in 50, 100, or 200 years. We might get there. But by that time, I hope we're going to do better in embedding, I'm going to geek out for a minute, an Asimov style of base rules for machines to perform. And regulations and pushback are going to lead there. Having this conversation is democracy at its best, having people against it and powerful people against it and people for it and pushing it forward and having that conversation open in public is going to embed our values in these systems ultimately.
In this context, shall we make AI explain or machine learning explainable? There is much being said about so-called XAI, explainable AI.
Yeah.
How do you refer to that?
I think we should always strive to make AI as explainable as possible. Not only for the concept of transparency, of saying, hey, there's nothing hidden going on here, but also because of our ability to learn from the system. Now, if we look at neural networks and deep learning, whenever you hear a lecture about neural networks and deep learning, the lecturer will say, this is like a neuron in the brain. Okay, we have this processing and we have all these synapses and axons, and what we're trying to do is in a computer create the same thing. We have this node and it has this connection to various other nodes, and each one has some computation, and that's how they pass that information. That simplification to a biologist and that simplification to a computer scientist is bullshit. Okay, they are not really the same thing. There are compounding levels of differences between them. But for the layman to understand the concept, that's a perfect analogy. Okay, so where does transparency come in there? It's to realize where the differences are, excuse me. So by opening up that black box, the layman can learn more and more about what is actually happening and understand the differences even more. I come from a background of science, and that's why, in my opinion, to see the errors is incredibly important, because that's where we learn. And transparency comes in there as well. In terms of the world of healthcare and transparency, that is actually very important and also fiscally dangerous because of the regulations. At some level, the regulating bodies are going to say, we have to know how the decision is made, especially if it's a quote unquote black box in the clinical decision support or the diagnosis phase. So we're saying that we're going to be trusting these machines to do the diagnoses for us. Actually, a perfect example is IBM's Watson Health. That a few years ago, they stopped working on it. They're still working on it in the background, but it stopped being an actual competitor in that market. Whereas Siemens and Philips and other companies who were developing the same thing are continuing. What was the major difference between these two companies? That IBM Watson, their goal was to replace the doctor. They're saying we can create something that makes the doctors obsolete, and that the doctor just needs to approve. Whereas all of the historically clinical companies, the medical care companies, their goal was to create something to assist the doctor, to assist his health. So one is transparent because the doctor sees how that system is working. And one is a black box because it replaces the doctor entirely and we don't care about the internal working. And the world was not ready for that. The world was basically saying, actually, no, we can't replace the doctor. I trust that human being. And I see nothing to trust that black box. If they would have made it completely open, i.e., anybody can see how that black box is making its decisions, then they wouldn't have been able to sell that product because everybody would have copied it. Even with a patent, everybody would have learned from it, created an emulator over it. They would have never been able to sell it. So the issue of transparency comes in handy in being able to pass through the regulating bodies and in creating the correct level of trust between the ultimate clients, which is all the patients or me and you and every other patient in the world, with the doctor taking care of me and with the system. And, the issue of patient-doctor trust is, you cannot overstate it. If the patient does not trust his doctor, they will ultimately make bad decisions again and again and again because anything that doctors say is going to be suspect. You can see that also with the recent push towards vaccinations and COVID, et cetera. The minute we started marketing healthcare, then people stopped trusting it. To say that a for-profit product is going to make my diagnoses instead of a human being is going to worsen that trust. But if it's open, if it's transparent, then that trust could be created. So I think it's really, really, really important to have transparency in machine learning in healthcare, but the right level of transparency. Having it completely open will destroy the market and will destroy innovation, et cetera. It needs to be understandable, not necessarily all the nuts and bolts. So when I say understandable, I need to know that if I input ABC, the result is D, and I need to understand that if I add an epsilon to ABC, how D will change. A little bit, not exactly, but to have, the direction of understanding how that decision is made.
Are we at a point that we can use machine learning in patients' diagnosis, in your opinion?
Well, okay. Define use. Are we at the point where machine learning is capable of creating a diagnosis? Almost. Are we at the point where machine learning is capable in assisting diagnosis? Definitely. We are there and that is happening. Okay, that is happening both with NLP and with various other deep learning capabilities of looking at the patient's complete history and saying, hey, he has a risk for A, B, and C. And I can say that there are startups, a dime a dozen of startups playing in this field directly of how can we assist in creating diagnoses. We are also at the point where machine learning is critical in helping a site, i.e. a hospital or any clinical center, to make sure that they don't miss critical information. And that is also helping diagnoses. That is directly helping diagnoses, or rather more importantly, helping avoid misdiagnoses. And that is already happening on a small scale right now, but in my opinion, it's going to really explode in the world in the next 5 years. All the major players are going to have a say or going to have a stake in that field.
Could you tell us a little bit more about NLP in medical diagnosis?
Okay, gladly. Let's start with where the patient's information is stored. So every hospital has what's called an EMR, which is basically a database for all your medical information. So when you have an appointment for a scan, that's a field that's stored in the EMR. When the doctor wrote you a note to send you to that scan, that information is also stored in the EMR, sometimes in a PDF, sometimes in a scan of the doctor note, and sometimes in a digital format in more advanced sites. So, the actual referral letter is digital and it's stored in a digital format. The scan itself and the results of that scan, and then the radiologist breakdown of that scan, or the cardiologist, or the lab results, and all that information is also stored in the EMR. Now, a lot of this is structured or semi-structured data. What do I mean by that? Structured is the format of that information stored in a database in such a way that is directly usable by a computer. Semi-structured is that there is a little bit of free text, at least in the fields themselves, but the overall form is structured. We know each line, what it refers to. We don't necessarily know the content in each line, and then we need a level of NLP on that information. And then we have the completely unstructured, and that is still the majority of the information. Those are either handwritten notes that still exists in the EMR, PDF or JPEGs of handwritten notes. And that means that we need OCR or optical object recognition to translate that note into letters, into a digital document with letters like Word or PDF, and then extract that information later for understanding, for NLU, for natural language understanding, and then turn that information into a structured information. So all of these processes create what I call right now a glass ceiling for NLP in the clinical workflow. Because of the amount of steps that I discussed and the dispersal and the breadth of information that we need for clinical decision support with NLP, no actual NLP in the clinical market, in the clinical diagnosis market, has yet to actually be used. Here and there, you have some companies trying these things out, but the FDA has not approved any such NLP program for the direct clinical diagnoses. NLP is actively being used continually in the clinical research area. So like I said, with what Zebra did to create a cohort for machine learning, or for population analysis. I want to understand how often or how many patients have this cancer, et cetera. In the past, it was lots of statisticians sitting and collecting the information. Right now, we're using NLP to run through all these documents and say with a high percentage of accuracy, and when I say high, 90%, 92%, how many patients with a certain disease exist in my population. Okay, why did I specifically state that 90%? Because when it comes to statistical information, 90% is great. When it comes to individual information, the one patient, 90% is not good enough. And that's where NLP is. NLP is between the 70 to 90 or 92% in the quality of results. Ultimately, it's a statistical algorithm. So for population analysis or for statistical research, that number or that quality of result is fine. But for that one patient who wants to make sure that he gets the best treatment possible and that the decisions made for him are made in a certain manner, that 90% is not good enough. And that's why NLP in that arena is yet to break the glass ceiling.
Right. The last question on my part.
Gladly.
Are spiders sentient?
Are spiders sentient? I think I actually hinted a little bit about my opinion about that. So a little bit about my background.
Yes, this is what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Which is quite fascinating, because let's say now I will lift up the mystery. You're a biologist by training and ethologist, let's say, with a PhD in ethology.
That's correct. Yeah.
So this is quite fascinating. How did you come to data science at the end of your scientific path? But
Well,
let's
first of all,
yeah.
with all
But
due
let's
respect,
first of
I
all,
don't see this
are
as the
spiders
end of my
sentient?
scientific path. I'm still in my path. So yeah, I am a biologist. My bachelor's degree was in computer science and biology. My master's degree was in neurobiology, and my PhD was in zoology, or a subfield of neuroethology. Ethology is animal behavior, and neuroethology is the neurobiology of animal behavior. And in my PhD, I studied visual perception in spiders, or specifically in jumping spiders. Visual perception is the process that we automatically do in our brain of taking the vast information that our eyes collect and turning it into a concept. If we talk about machine learning, categorization. So we take all this visual information and we categorize a screen, a chair, a table, etc., into objects. And I studied that with jumping spiders. The process of categorization or perception is a cognitive process that relates to sentience. Sentience as a term is undefined. Anything that we do that we perceive as a slightly more than instinct is what we define as sentience. The sum of all those abilities is what we call sentience or self-awareness. But what exactly is each point of it is very complicated to define. And because of that, we can't really prove it. That comes to what I said earlier of ultimately, it's not going to be the one thing. Going back to your actual questions about jumping spiders, spiders in general and jumping spiders in more precisely have the ability to learn. They learn from their own experience, but they also have the ability to learn by watching another spider do something. Even on a screen, if I were to show a jumping spider the process of decision making of to go left or right in order to find the prey on a screen, he will learn to do that and he will imitate that and do that later. One of the most quote unquote intelligent spiders is called the Portia jumping spider. And this is a jumping spider that specializes in hunting other spiders and other jumping spiders. The reason that is not too surprising is because, if you think about evolution, where does our ability to learn or big bangs come from? Ultimately, it's to overcome challenges. And the biggest challenge is that your main food is going to be a predator, because if you do that incorrectly, you're gone. So the ability of the Portia jumping spider to learn is incredible. And they can learn also, they have a sense when they hunt the spider, they will try something and they will sense, hey, this is not working. He's aware of me. An hour or two later, they will come back and use a different tactic in order to hunt that spider. So they have a long-term memory, not only short-term memory. They have shifting capabilities. So this isn't just instinct and how I catch my prey. This is actually a cognitive information process. Whether or not they're sentient, I think sentience is a scale. I don't think sentience is a spark. So at some level, they are sentient, and we will slowly learn about more and more animals where they fall on that scale. If you ask any dog owner if their dog is sentient, they're obviously going to say yes. And if their cat is sentient, they're going to say yes. If you ask the average person if a cow is sentient, they're probably going to say no in order to protect their own feelings. But a cow is very, very intelligent as well. A cow knows how to have fun and knows how to play. That's, in my opinion, a strong level of self-awareness and sentience. So everything there is going to be ultimately a scale. We tend not to think about insects or arthropods in general, where the spiders fall in as well, as sentient or animals with a complex brain. But the complexity of the brain doesn't come from its size. It comes from the amount, not only, but also comes from the amount of synapses or the amount of connections. To use the same discussion we had in the earlier phase, when you think about a deep neural network, the complexity is not only in the amount of layers, but the amount of connections of each node to the other layers. And the brain is much the same in those terms. The complexity is in the amount of synapses that you're going to have. And the spider's brain, as tiny as it is, has billions of those. So,
Right.
it doesn't necessarily have the billions of neurons, but synapses and connections, it does. And that means it's a very complex system capable of a lot of computing.
Yeah, I've recently watched a video with a professor of psychiatrics, that most uh, psychic illnesses like depressions are related to disappearing of synapses, in fact.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. That's actually very interesting.
I mean, let's
Yeah,
say
I'll look
this
into
is
that.
how you see it from medical point of view, right? Not
Yeah.
from psychological point of view.
Well, ultimately, those two fields are going to merge.
Mm.
I think ultimately, they already are merged under healthcare. Okay, in healthcare, we separated between, the medical condition and the psychological condition, but they're both healthcare already. And more, we're going to see cross-field research into our hormones, our brains, our synapses, and that entire complex process, and how that affects how we feel and who we are.
Yeah, I was just saying this in the context that the more yes, sentient and we are, and the better we think, so to say, is, let's say, how dense is everything connected, so to say. And this
Yeah,
I love this analogy. I love that you criticize the to the extent this analogy, how we portray neural networks as something similar to the brain structure, which is yes, it actually is not.
yeah,
Right, but this is just used as a pictures. On the other hand, yes, it's more understandable to people.
yeah,
But it's also, let's say, in the context of neural networks, also how densely it is, let's say, all connected. Let's say,
yeah, definitely.
definitely.
So the one question I didn't answer yet is how I got from biology and ethology to working in the medical market. Um, I've always viewed computers as a tool rather than a target. And in my PhD, I collected vast amounts of data, and being technology driven, I've kept my feet dabbling in computer science all the time. And I basically developed my own machine learning algorithms in order to assist me in analyzing the data. In the specific case, I was tracking the eye motions of the jumping spiders to understand how they process different images. And I needed to prove that for different images, they process the image differently, i.e. the eye movements are significantly different. And using Markov models and a AI-based tracking system, I was able to show a significant differences in the eye movement according to different images, and significant differences when they are primed. So primed is when I flash an image for a few milliseconds to their side eyes. Didn't say that, but spiders have 8 eyes. So some of their eyes are in the back of their head. So I flashed a certain image to the eye in the back of their head. The spiders quickly turned towards that image, but then I presented a different image. And whether or not that flash created a difference in how they analyzed an image, i.e., did I generate an expectation, was what I used machine learning to analyze.
That's interesting.
And from there, the application of machine learning or is applicable, to any data. I was lucky enough to be hired because I did a PhD and not because of the content of my PhD. And I think this is, goes out to students doing their PhDs everywhere in the world. The tool set you gain in applying research is not only in the field that you're researching, it's in the ability to take a unknown field, break it down to steps, and apply specific logic to analyze each step. And that is an incredibly tool to have for anybody who's willing to look at that ability rather than the content of what you did. So there are jobs out there for all of them, even if it's not in microbiology. And I was lucky enough to be identified for that tool set. And since then, I've been running in this field.
Very well said about PhD students. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Yinnon, thank you very much for this conversation. Absolutely fascinating. Always
Thank
a
you.
huge pleasure to meet a man of science in the field of data. And I think that, let's say, some fantastic takeaways about trust in the context of algorithms, and also about how seeing things from various perspectives matters.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Including spiders.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. And thank you for reaching out to me. It was great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Sherpa Search on Tech. If you have enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our show wherever you listen. Thanks again. The Sherpa Search on Tech podcast is a production of Sherpa Search, an executive search firm specializing in the tech industry, helping hire the right people for expert and managerial positions, and advising how to build and develop long-lasting, high-performing IT teams. If you would like to learn more, reach out to us at maciej.szczerba@sherpasearch.tech or visit our website sherpasearch.tech. See you next time.